infection. And cross-infection is really about when patients with cystic fibrosis are well. They want to know, does it exist, and what will happen to me, and what can I do when I'm well. Up to now we've been talking about when maybe things don't go so well, people are ill, but now this topic is for people and their carers when they're well. Something happened? Oh, where's he gone? Oh my God. Oh, right, okay, I can do it on here. That's fine. So really, what you want to know, don't you, is there any evidence that there is person-to-person transfer of bacteria between cystic fibrosis patients? And if that transfer takes place, what happens to me if I get somebody else's bacteria? Is it a problem for me? And also you want to know, if cross-infection takes place, what can be done? What can I do? And what can the doctors looking after me do to prevent that happening? So they're really the questions. Now, there is evidence that there is transfer of bacteria from person to person. It's relatively old in that in the UK and the US, in the old days, people with cystic fibrosis did go on holidays together, have summer camps, and when we followed those bacteria, the people when we looked at the Pseudomonas from those bacteria, from those patients, the same bacteria was found in those people. So that it is so that you can get bacteria transferred from one person to another. However, the contact was very close. We're talking about children cuddling up together in sleeping bags. We're talking about other patients doing other patients' physio, etc. So you've got to remember, although it happens, you've got to look at, well, what did cause this transfer of bacteria? There was also reports very recently that you can get a bacteria called a Chromobacter in Denmark. This was case reports of people going on a skiing holiday. So actually there wasn't very close contact, but looking at the bacteria in detail, they were the same bacteria from the index case, so there is proof that certainly people can transfer this particular bacteria. And in the UK now, we're coming across lots of patients who have what we call non-tuberculous mycobacteria. And there's evidence there again in a group in Cambridge that those bacteria have been given from one patient to another. They attended a clinic, and the bacteria are the same in those patients. So I think it's fair to say that we do know that cystic fibrosis patients can give each other their bacteria. The question, of course, is what sort of contact you need to do that. Now, in Australia, however, against that argument, the study looked at the type of bacteria in those that lived in the city and those that lived in the country. And they found, and they all attended the same clinic, but they found that actually the transfer of bacteria, the bacteria that the patients had was more related to where they lived, i.e. in their environment, as opposed to whether or not they attended the clinic, because they all attended the clinic. That's another little bit of information for you. Now, okay, so bacteria can be given from one person to another, we know that, but does it matter? Is there any evidence that getting somebody else's bacteria might affect you adversely? Well, there is some evidence that in Australia, that those patients who had non-mucoid Pseudomonas who then developed mucoid Pseudomonas. So remember my glacier, and as the glacier recedes, you get bacteria coming in an orderly way. Well, if you're to get Pseudomonas, hopefully that wasn't my fault. If you're going to get Pseudomonas, you should really get the non-mucoid form and then the mucoid form. But in Australia, they got the mucoid form straight away, and those patients did worse than having bacteria coming up in a hierarchical way. So in Australia, there's evidence that if you get the bacteria from someone else, and you get it sooner than you should have done, you don't do so well. Same as a strain of Pseudomonas in Liverpool, and we do have evidence that people who get the MRSA bacteria do worse than those that don't. And it seems to be that if you acquire the bacteria from another person, as opposed in the hierarchical way like the glacier recedes, that it's worse for you. So it's better to get your bacteria from the environment and what's around you than from somebody else. Now this isn't so in a disease that is very like cystic fibrosis, that is non-CF bronchiectasis. So we have another group of patients who we see in a clinic, who we don't segregate at all, the elderly people who have Pseudomonas, but there's no evidence that they get bacteria from each other. So it seems to be something about the immunology or the damage in cystic fibrosis airways. Okay, so can we make changes so that this doesn't happen? There's a recent paper to suggest that bacteria are alive in a room 45 minutes after a patient has left it, and that you have to be 4 meters away from somebody, or rather, if a bacteria can actually travel 4 meters away. But just because that bacteria was found 4 meters away and was in the room 45 minutes afterwards, doesn't mean that that bacteria necessarily can be transmitted to a patient. So that's an extreme. However, what can we do with a bit of sort of common sense, really? And that's limit person-to-person contact, segregate patients on the known bacteria they have, and really be very sensible about hygiene. Now, all this is a huge debate and has a huge impact on cystic fibrosis patients and their families. Because while other diseases can get support from each other and from each other's families, and it's a real worry for patients. Now, the US made a statement, the US Foundation, that patients with cystic fibrosis can only attend meetings, 1 per meeting. And this engendered a huge debate, and there was a response from the patients to say, okay, I hear what you say, but it's our choice. We want to be informed, but then we want to choose whether we wish to take that risk or not. And the patients very much felt excluded, therefore, from their organisation, and felt that they couldn't influence, wouldn't be able to influence the cystic fibrosis organisation in the US. And there is a big controversy. And of course, the Greeks have got it right, because your wonderful dramatist, Aeschylus, in the Orestean trilogy, the Furies say the middle course is best. And I think that's probably true. I think the middle course is best. And we're going to hear a little bit more from the next presentation.